the children and world vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, and very shortly my 2 comedian guests and myself will be going through tomorrow's, that is Thursday's, newspapers to see what they have in store for us. In the meantime, here are the news headlines.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the 1.25% rise in national insurance is unquestionably right for our country and the NHS. The increase means Britain's tax burden has now risen to its highest point in 70 years, impacting the income of millions of households. The government predicts £39 billion will be raised over the next 3 years. Boris Johnson says it will help reduce the NHS waiting lists.
Most important thing is to have a strong, robust economy in which you have a high level of security in your employment, in which people know that there's a long-term plan to deliver jobs and growth.
Meanwhile, the government has promised to take back control of energy costs in plans to make 95% of electricity low carbon by 2030. Ministers are promising to make cleaner and more affordable energy by boosting wind, solar and hydrogen. Labour says the plan wouldn't help with rising costs. Mr Johnson says, though, the strategy would also reduce the UK's dependence on foreign sources of energy. A security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin, suspected of spying for Russia, has been extradited from Germany to the UK. David Smith was arrested by German police last August and is accused of collecting information to pass on to the Russian state. The 57-year-old is expected to appear in Westminster Magistrates' Court tomorrow. Vladimir Putin's daughters are among those being sanctioned by the US over Russia's alleged war crimes in Ukraine. In a new round of sanctions announced this afternoon, the US says it is targeting Russian financial institutions as well as Kremlin officials and their family members. US President Joe Biden says in 1 year, American sanctions are set to wipe out the last 15 years of Russia's economic gains.
There's nothing less happening than major war crimes. Responsible nations have to come together to hold these perpetrators accountable. And together with our allies and our partners, we're going to keep raising the economic cost and ratchet up the pain for Putin and further increase Russia's economic isolation.
President Zelensky says events in Bucha and other regions are worse than those during the Nazi occupation 80 years ago. He says Ukraine will make sure they bring the Russian military to justice for every crime they've committed following the attacks. He says the world must see what Russia has done. The Prime Minister says biological males should not compete in women's sports. Speaking during a visit to a hospital, Boris Johnson said to him it seems sensible. It's after he defended the government's decision not to include trans people in the proposed ban on conversion therapy. He added there were complexities and sensitivities which needed to be worked through. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Headliners with Simon.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I am Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, 40% tax bracket worker Leo Kearse and tax-exempt Nick Dixon. But he's young. There's time yet. It's a big story for us tonight, the tax thing, but it's actually slightly prickly, isn't it, for comedians? Do you know? I always feel there is that slightly. Some people are always a little bit too quick to anecdotally drop into the conversation that they have VAT, for instance.
Yeah, comedians all pretend to be lefty socialist men or women or non-binary people of the people.
Yeah.
And they always say, you know, they carry on like they don't, you know, they want to help the NHS and help the government to be the ultimate socialist.
Minimise their tax liabilities.
And they all are set up as limited companies and stuff cash under the mattress.
Absolutely. Well, we got our comeuppance during the furlough scheme, didn't we? Anyway, before we go any further with that, let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We start with the Daily Mail. Finally, a voice of common sense. That refers, of course, to Boris Johnson making what would only 10 minutes ago have seemed extraordinarily banal observations about the nature of human sex and gender. The Mail says, finally, a voice of common sense. And also, now Putin's daughters are hit by sanctions. A lot of newspapers taking the opportunity to publish some glamorous Russian totty tonight. The Telegraph says, what is this pit, I asked. They said, this is a graveyard for you. Well, that's a fairly bleak scene there being described, I would imagine, from the Ukraine. Also, energy plan backs nuclear, wind and solar. Plus, Sunak's wife, a non-dom for tax purposes. That is the story which prompted the reflections you saw a few minutes earlier. The Independent leads on an exclusive that Rishi Sunak's wife avoided paying her tax bills through her non-domicile status. I say an exclusive, although obviously you've also seen that on another paper, and I suspect that will be one of our main stories. It is said Akshata Murthy, that's her name, may have, and to be fair, my own wife keeps her name as well, Akshata Murthy may have saved millions on foreign earnings. There doesn't seem to be much doubt about it, to be honest. Thursday's Guardian says the PM's push for nuclear power splits Tories and angers Green groups. I can't imagine why. They must be fundamentally illiterate about the nature of energy. Plus, US targets daughters of Putin with fresh sanctions, and Sunak's wife is registered as non-dom for tax purposes. That's the big three stories on The Guardian. The Financial Times says Western allies impose harshest sanctions yet on Russian banks. No pictures of Putin's daughters. And Facebook's owner plans Zuckbucks, I guess that's Zuckerman, isn't it? And digital coin foray. So they're coming out with their own crypto coinage into the metaverse. Ugh, it's also very tiresome. The Mirror says Sunak wife tax fury. Good old-fashioned Mirror headline-ese there, as Rishi Sunak's wife may be spared paying millions in UK taxes while her husband raids the nation's wallets. The Times leads with UK to send armoured vehicles to aid the Ukraine, as military chiefs say the UK is adding to its offer of lethal weapons in the belief that the next 3 weeks will be critical in determining the outcome of the war. And the Daily Express goes with, thank you, Prime Minister. Sports stars back Boris in trans row, not a trans row, which would be an interesting sort of show closer, but that is instead the row, and Boris has finally made some sort of commitment to his come off the fence. Fill your boats, say the Sun. The thieves nicked 250 grand's worth of diesel from Navy ship to flog on literally a black market. And the Star say sacked for being a Brit. Plus Basil Row on Botox and dog snog danger. Oh, goodness, they are pulling out all the tongue twisters there. Those are the headlines. Let's have a deep dive. So we will start with Thursday's Independent, although it's on virtually all the papers. It's the story that has made plenty of front pages. Leo, what do you think about Chancellor Rishi Sunak's wife claiming non-domicile status?
Yeah, so this is the story. Rishi Sunak famously married into a billionaire family. The family's worth $3.5 billion, apparently.
Through Infosys, I think, which is a company even I've heard of.
Yeah, so through Infosys and through other companies as well. But this story specifically relates to the dividends that Rishi's wife, Akshata Murthy, receives. So she gets £11.5 million a year in dividends from Infosys, and she's registered as a non-domicile now, so she avoids all tax, as far as I understand it. She doesn't have to pay a penny of any income tax, corporation tax, or any of the rest of it in the UK. And this is coming right, pretty much the same week as Rishi has raised taxes. For
and
British
has been
people.
photographed filling up a car that wasn't his. Although, to be fair, he does drive quite a small car. I mean, non-dom. It's been like hovering in the air like a bad smell for years. This apparently it's like centuries old as legislation. It goes back to George III or something, that it was an opportunity to avoid paying tax. Nobody seems to understand it. It seems to be a sort of a tolerated, an indulged option for the super rich.
Well, as I understand it, if you're going to be non-domiciled, you've got to spend at least 9 months of the year outside the UK.
Well, that's what I always thought, but I think that's right. I don't think that's right. I think you can live outside the UK. I mean, this is like living in Jersey or whatever, but according to the papers I've seen today, apparently not.
So she can just live. She can live in the UK.
It's entirely
take in all that money and not pay a penny in tax. I mean, that seems intolerable. But it's obviously coming at a terrible time for Rishi. Not only has he put up the tax bills on average for British people by nearly £3,000 a year, he's plummeting in the polls. He's down to minus. He was one of the front runners to.
He's lower than Keir Starmer now. What do you think, Nick?
Over.
Is this stick in your craw as it is in ours?
It doesn't sound great. It's one of those things where you can look into the fine detail, and perhaps it isn't as bad as it sounds. But for political purposes, that's almost irrelevant. It sounds terrible. I mean, it's saying here, like you say, the law goes back to 1799. It says India does not allow its citizens to hold the citizenship of another country simultaneously. So according to British law, Ms. Murthy is treated as a non-domicile for UK tax purposes. So it's all legal, as we said. It just doesn't sound great. And as you've mentioned, we've already got Rishi borrowing cars. His wife's not really a proper resident. He should put down some roots and commit. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think so.
Own something.
If you want to be Prime Minister, at least be domiciled in the country.
That is the key, isn't it? That is the key. If he wants to be Prime Minister, if he just wants to, even if he just wants to be Chancellor, to be honest, if you're kind of going, well, it's a trivial amount of money in terms of the overall tax burden that's being. But the optics are terrible.
The optics are terrible, and also it's not a trivial amount of money. I don't know how much you're getting paid for tonight, but £11.5 million. I mean, how much money do you need? I mean, that's when she's dodging her taxes, avoiding paying tax in the UK. That's not just money.
Well,
that's kidney
right.
dialysis machines for the NHS. That's life support units for maternity wards.
You're absolutely right. It's not trivial. It's not even trivial by national debt standards. It's certainly not trivial by the standards of what most of us are being expected to go put up with. I completely agree. And I normally do kind of, retreat from the ad homs. Do you know what I mean? If you're like, well, you do this with the law, but at home you do that. But this is just absurd, isn't it? It's just crazy.
Particularly if you want to be Prime Minister.
Perhaps he doesn't. Thursday's Telegraph says a politician appears to have identified a possible answer to the modern era's riddle of the Sphinx. This is the question that has been befuddling every politician who's been confronted. Finally, Boris has cut the Gordian knot.
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
I almost couldn't say it myself. What are these things?
Why is a woman? Not more like a man. That was a hit song. Those were the days.
Oh, yeah. Telegraph. Boris Johnson says biological males should not compete in women's sports. So if you watch the statement, Boris did a sort of short interview, and it was surprisingly good. Occasionally, the Tories will throw us these conservative-sounding token soundbites.
Yeah.
And he made a really good statement. He did a bit of virtue signaling at the start about flags and stuff, but then he came into the key point, which is that men, crazy points, but he addresses safe spaces. First, he said women need to have safe spaces, and he also said, perhaps, crazy idea, biological men shouldn't compete in women's sports. So it's good that he said it, though I do sort of question how pathetic our political discourse is, that the Tories can win the next election by saying men shouldn't be in women's sports and perhaps women maybe don't have penises. And they could win on that.
I remember for like 5 years ago watching, because I was addicted, like a lot of people on Twitter are, to investigating YouTube clips from campus outrages in liberal arts colleges in America that have nothing to do with my life. But seeing this kind of
Shapiro owns and destroys.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of stuff. And there was a thing at Evergreen where a man, Brett Weinstein, who was exposed to ridiculous kind of taunts and threats of violence from students and so on. But it was the kind of burgeoning of that movement. And Jordan Peterson first became a fairly sort of famous stroke notorious figure, depending on your politics at that point.
C-16.
He raising the Canadian law compelled speech, but also what he was describing as cultural Marxism stroke postmodernism. And a lot of people said he's a little bit confused in some of his philosophical terms, but basically the postmodern idea that you just question everything, you dissolve all the boundaries, you dissolve all meaning, all words are contingent. There's no truth. There's nothing that's any more truth in it. Yeah. And I have been reading into a bit more of that since, and I think there's something to that. The extent to which our discourse has just dissolved. We spent centuries building, cathedrals of meaning.
Right.
With, and they've just been reduced to rubble. And we're standing around in the 21st century trying to decide what a woman is.
But this is really an intractable issue, because it's fine to say, women can't have penises or whatever. But what about a transgender woman who's put the effort in, looks like a woman, said the surgeon,
and has had a really good, a quality penis sewn on.
Like, no, transgender women don't have the penises sewn on. But
so the other way around.
Leo, you understand? We can't use as a metric Leo Kearse's subjective opinion on whether a woman's put in the effort. Because that's what you want, isn't it?
This is the only way.
Funny enough, though,
the only way you can solve this intractable issue, because you can't have men saying that they're women and then being allowed into women's prisons or change or whatever. But equally, you can't have transgender women being forced to use male.
Well, we have two things that I think have gone on. There's this one, which is a political movement to dissolve the meaning of speech, which, for political purposes, I think, in order to be able to then shift things under the cover of the fog that's created, the steam. But I think equally we do have to recognise that things, both a strange kind of developments in science and technology that allow some a shift, operations to actually take place that wouldn't meaningfully have happened. But also, I think there is some strange force at play. It might be endocrine disruption. There might be, the changing balances in hormones and so on. There seems to be more confusion in the world, in people. I don't know whether it was always there potentially, that it could have been aroused by the right kind of discourse.
Well, I do tend to think it's sown by the media, because we saw this, we did a story recently on here when something like 5,500 children were on the waiting list for the NHS for gender reassignment or gender transition, whatever. And the accusation was and it had increased massively in lockdown. So the accusation was that these kids are seeing this in the media. And I think there's a lot in that. They haven't suddenly become more and more confused people. There's always a certain number who struggle with this, but I don't believe it's radically expanded.
Yeah, and the media is now pushing this narrative that being straight or being cisgender or being white or anything like, or being male are evil things.
Or
bad
at least,
things.
even worse than that, boring.
Yeah.
Really boring. Kids are like, they're 7 or 8 or 12 or 15 and they kind of go, well, that's obviously the one thing I don't want to be is just that kind of...
There's no pride march for them. Nobody's painting a police car white.
And then there's the unfortunate trend where you can't be a tomboy anymore. You perhaps can't even be a lesbian anymore.
And I used to love tomboys. They were my favourite kind of girls. Less threatening. Thursday's Mirror has found an angle that allows them to print photographs of some Russian glamour. Nick, what do you reckon? Is this a fair game? Putin's daughters are being targeted for sanctions now.
Yes, Vladimir Putin's daughters sanctioned by US after Russia accused of Ukraine war crimes. Obviously, this is a response to Bucha, if that's the correct pronunciation. Obviously, that was horrific. And these are his daughters, who are rarely seen in public. They're in their 30s, and we just don't hear much about them. But the belief is that assets are being held within the family. So it's part of a wider set of sanctions, where they're sanctioning also the biggest bank. And the claim is that they're going to send the living conditions of the country back to Soviet era in the 1980s, which is one of these things that's very sad for citizens who will incur the cost. So I understand why it's happening. And Biden has called these devastating sanctions, which I think is a bit strange, because it's not really for us to decide if they're devastating. They either will be or they won't be. But yes, that's a minor point. So they're basically... Well,
it's not entirely minor, actually. You're right. The rhetoric they use to try and describe these things is significant, isn't it? He's trying to make them emotional.
Because we can't, presumably because he doesn't want to do military action, he has to say these are devastating sanctions. And of course, they probably do have a huge impact, but that might be the reason.
It's always interesting. I mean, we have talked about this before. The idea that sanctions are somehow a more humane approach to waging war without actually transgressing Geneva codes, whatever. It's not always the case, is it? Sanctions...
It could be stopping Russian people getting access to nutritious food or medicine and things like that.
It can actually impact the least blameworthy Russians instead of going into the battlefield and just taking out the most blameworthy.
Which we've seen in Iran. But I mean, I think the West is also we're donating a lot of military equipment to Ukraine and a lot of high-tech stuff that can really take out tanks and switchblades and things like that can be directed on the field. So we are helping there, as much as we can, without actually putting a foot in Ukraine.
And yet, as others have said, even as we do that, and I think it's up to nearly $2 billion worth of military supplies and aid has been provided. That is still less than the amount of money that's been paid over the course of the war by the EU to Russia for the fuel they continue to take from them.
Every day Germany is giving Russia $800 million to pay for oil and gas. So, I mean, it's ridiculous to have sanctions. You know, they make a big fuss about these sanctions. They are hitting some of Putin's allies, though. So Roman Abramovich has been hustling to try and borrow money from his friends.
Wow.
Because he can't pay his staff. He needs to pay his staff £750,000 a week.
You should try Rishi's wife. She might have a bit.
An oligarch staff marches on its stomach. Thursday's Independent reports on yet more irritating behaviour from hysterical eco-halfwits, although other opinions may be available. What do you think, Leo?
So this is a campaign called Just Stop Oil, which even sounds histrionic and scream.
It does, doesn't it? It really can.
Just stop oil! Mum, will you just stop oil, please? Anyway, they've these green-haired, septum-pierced halfwits have stormed an oil terminal in Essex in a bid to cut off the petrol supply to the whole of South East England. I
bet it was more like drizzle than storm as well, to be honest.
I should imagine one guy in a high-vis jacket could batter the lot of them. I mean, they could just pick their moment. I mean, just pick your moment with this stuff. You know, you could have done it during COP26. You could do it in a few months when we've resolved all these issues. But at the moment, we've got an energy crisis. The cost of living is spiralling for working people.
And even their own protests are incoherent on that front, because they're saying stop drilling for new oil and stop forcing people to choose between heating and eating. Well, the whole point of the heating price rises is that we are trying to make an expensive transition to a green economy. Not the whole point, but that was going to happen anyway.
We're moving in that direction anyway. And I guarantee that none of these 25 members of Just Stop Oil rode a horse to where they're going. They would have used petrol and oil to get there. They're wearing clothes made out of synthetic fibres, which are made from oil. Everything, the electricity they're using is made from burning oil.
Did you read the comment? Because I actually watched the whole interview with one of these girls, and they've actually quoted her here. Hannah from Brighton said, "I'm so scared. I'm 23, and the only way people will listen to me is if I lock onto the pipework of a fueling station." Just read that sentence back to yourself slowly.
The only word she needs to change there is scared. I'm Hannah, I'm 93, I'm so solipsistic, I'm so self-obsessed. The only way that anyone will listen to me is I'm so pathetic, I fail to add value to society.
I've got this crazy idea. Do something that garners respect. Or maybe get some elocutionists. Do something that will make someone listen to you. And you're right, the fact that they always look, like Leo said, septum pierced, etc. Wouldn't you have more respect if one of them just showed up in a three-piece suit and you'd be like, actually, they might be onto something? Because they do it to themselves. We just look and go, of course they think.
I was talking about this. We did a show last week, and there was a talk about Primark and so on. You know, single-use clothing. Or most people pay 10 quid for a shirt, and you can't even get it through a single wash. You know, you wear it for a weekend and it's dead. And it's terrible, and they end up in landfill. And I was saying, you know, the aristocracy, of which I consider myself to be an honorary member, have had the solution to this for centuries. You know, I own shoes that are 20 years old.
Right.
In fact, I own more shoes that are more than 10 years old than not.
The argument is poor people can't do that.
You've got to save up a little bit. But that would be a great way of doing it, actually. If you could arrange for payment schemes for people to buy brogues from proper cobblers.
Can I just say one more thing? These people are lacking meaning in their lives, and they need Jesus. That's all I'm going to say. Just a quick plug. But they do
I think
need
that is a perfect point at which to go to the first break. Seek Jesus or buy these products and services. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'm joined by Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. So our next story has Nick's fingerprints all over it. It's a football story, but it's not really a football story. It's certainly not a sporting story. This is Matt Le Tissier.
Yes, indeed. In The Sun, Matt Le Tissier quits role as Southampton ambassador following fan backlash to Butcher massacre tweet. So there was a tweet. I'll give you the gist of the tweet, which he had quote tweeted. It said the media lied about weapons of mass destruction, they lied about COVID, they lied about Hunter Biden's laptop, but honestly they're telling the truth about Butcher, so it's obviously saying they're not. And he said this with a finger pointing emoji, and this has got people a bit upset, to say the least. And so now he's quit his ambassador role, which I think is a shame. So Matt Le Tissier, if they somehow don't know, was a genius football player, one of the greatest of all time. The kind of player, even if he scored 2 goals against my team, Man United, you almost had to applaud him.
Yeah.
And there was something wonderfully English about the fact that he stayed at Southampton the whole time. And he had that thing where he'd seem a bit half-hearted, then he'd do something great, which kind of is what this country is all about. But he was a genius footballer. He's now been
He stayed at Southampton, if I remember rightly, because he lived in Guernsey, I think, or Jersey, and he wanted to always be able to fly home.
Yeah. Was he non-domiciled?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't trying to play a clever financial game. He just loved his family, and he liked going home. And there was a short flight back across the channel.
And he could have gone to massive clubs because he was a genius, but he didn't, and he was a total legend. And by the way, Gary Lineker's criticised him. I'd just say I would back Le Tissier over Lineker any day in any kind of match.
Gary Lineker, another tax dodger.
Yeah.
But the interesting about the story is, now, I don't believe he should have to quit because of this, because we can have different views and he can still be a great ambassador for Southampton. So that's disappointing, that part to me. I see why he's under pressure. And the critique, I would say, because he's gone a bit down the conspiracy route, and my critique of that is, while the so-called conspiracy theorists, less pejoratively red-pilled or awake people, while they are right to be sceptical about the mainstream narrative, the blue-pilled world, because we know we're told lies, we know there's distortions, they're absolutely right to do that. But where they sometimes go a bit wrong, in my humble opinion, is they then fail to apply the same level of skepticism to the new paradigm, and they say, now I've got all the answers, and this is the narrative. Or they go for a kind of all-encompassing cynicism where they say everything's fake. The war in Ukraine is fake, Will Smith's slap is fake, everything's fake, and they kind of switch their brain off. I believe we should sort of stay in the middle in a kind of intellectual
to be
purgatory.
fair, that is what Immanuel Kant did.
Right.
Who did he play for?
He played for Heidelberg, I think, and in the critique of pure reason, he said we can never know anything and whether it's true.
Oh, brilliant! So I've said the same as Kant, just with my own bedroom philosophy.
Yeah.
But my point is, that's why I call myself a conspiracy moderate, because I totally love the spirit of the conspiracy theorists, so-called.
Yes.
But I think we can't really know. We can just question. We can try and get to the truth, but we shouldn't be too quick.
But we were talking, and we just mentioned this in the break. A friend of ours, a mutual friend, Konstantin Kissin, who presents a very worthwhile podcast called Trigonometry with a co-host Francis Foster. He put on a Twitter a couple of months ago now a long thread about how people had lost faith in the media, and he gave all the examples of how we'd been lied to, and they were very good examples.
Yeah.
And to be fair to Matt Le Tissier, a couple of the examples he gives there. I'm not saying I don't think COVID is a fake, but
it goes back like 20 years. It goes back to weapons of mass destruction. That's 20 years ago. And everybody knew it was a lie at the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit unfair. It's like when people say there's no funny right-wing comedians and they say, like, Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning was funny and we're talking...
No, it's not quite like that, because it's the weapons of mass destruction were used as a casus belli.
Yeah.
And successfully so. And that war was devastating and catastrophic.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still question whether Assad, stroke Putin, would have used chemical weapons on his own people
Yeah, and I actually marched against that war, by the
predictable
way.
effect of which would have been to bring in American... I'm not saying I am... It's like you say, you've got to be sceptical, critical thinking, maintain it at all times.
Yeah, but I feel...
Very difficult. No, I think his tweet was wrong.
So many people, during the COVID pandemic, when they carried it with them to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, oh, Ukraine's the next thing in the news, so the government must be lying, the mainstream media must be lying to us about this. And I don't think the mainstream media are. I think it's long. And
would it be possible, this is not the mainstream media, would it be possible, I don't believe it's true, if I was forced to bet on even money right now, I would back Zelensky and Ukraine and say this was an atrocity, it's what it looked like. But would it be conceivable that Ukraine and other actors would create the appearance of a worse atrocity than actually took place, a more morally horrific atrocity, in order to escalate the commitment of the West?
There are obviously always going to be... I mean, we've seen footage of people being executed by Ukrainian soldiers.
Yeah.
We've seen, we know that there are neo-Nazis fighting in Mariupol on behalf of... But the fact that people focus on the tiny, like the 1% of the Ukrainian army that have, slightly dodgy ultra-nationalist ideals, the fact that they focus on that at the expense of the wider picture of a, absolutely despicable, abhorrent, pointless invasion of Ukraine that's massacring thousands of civilians, that reveals so much. And it's really, to me, it's really brought out the people on the right and the left, like Jeremy Corbyn, who don't fight on behalf of individual rights, Western liberalism, freedom and democracy, and all the good things that I thought we were all fighting for during the COVID pandemic.
I think that's a reasonable critique, but I do also think, as you say, the cynicism goes back to weapons of mass destruction or earlier. I mean, I went on the march against the Iraq war, and I did feel after that, when we were completely ignored, of course, by Blair, there was a real cynicism that set in, and it's only got so much worse in social media. And
it goes back to the Lusitania. Never mind. Thursday's Times has a story emerging out of Shanghai, and Leo, this takes us right back to the early days of lockdown 2020, when we used to watch them singing on the balconies in northern Italy.
Yeah. So in China, they're still. I mean, we've completely shaken off COVID now. Yeah. I mean, people get COVID and nobody cares.
Maybe our strategy was great. We actually have a bit of footage of this. I think the drone. I hope is that the case? Getting a message to say that we have. Keep talking anyway. We'll see whether it appears. Yeah, there may be.
So basically, China has pursued a zero COVID policy, which is not the best policy. Here we go.
Here we go. The concern. So these drones are telling people to stay indoors, right? That's essentially the nature of it.
They're saying, control your soul's thirst for freedom. Do not open your windows and sing. It
sounds like a haiku. I know that's wrong. I know that's racist. We've got the wrong one.
That sounds like somebody making fun of the Chinese Communist Party in a comedy skit.
Isn't it not like something you would have written in beautiful calligraphy on the wall with the translation underneath it?
I mean, I think I actually got that tattooed on my ankle in Thailand. But yeah, so China's pursued zero COVID, which is a terrible policy when you've got something like Omicron, which isn't particularly deadly and also spreads incredibly easily, so you can't control.
Is this what they've got, Omicron?
So I'm not sure if it's Omicron or some other transformer, but basically they've locked down Shanghai, which obviously is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cities in China. Certainly economically one of the most important. So this is impacting China's economy hugely, and they're also. I mean, China's been becoming progressively more authoritarian. For a while now. We always thought for decades...
You wouldn't think it could get that much worse, would you? But
it always can. It always can.
As it got richer, it would
it's like the national
towards
debt,
Western democracy.
Right, that was the naivety. And actually they've combined authoritarianism with corporatism and they're finding it works horrifically well.
Yeah, so now they've got that sort of free market economy, but not a free market social life.
This is exactly true. And I have to say, I've had conversations with friends where I've basically apologised for the opinion I had 20 years ago that globalisation would just spread, the Fukuyama image.
Yes. End of history. Although apparently he was unfairly treated in that book and he didn't quite mean what
they said. Oh, no, he didn't. He actually said, and I think he had brilliant insight into human nature because he's a fantastic political and economic scientist and historian, Fukuyama, but he was also correct in saying, when he took the expression from Nietzsche, the end of history and the last man, but he said, you watch us screw it up now. We've reached the end of history. Everything's sorted. Liberal democracy has won. We can't bear it. We cannot bear it. We can't live without it.
Like Dostoevsky said, we don't accept a perfect
exactly.
scenario.
We have to stick something in the spokes.
I read another translation that said, control your soul's thirst for freedom. Do not open your windows and sing.
What's amazing as well, it's even worse than that, because commentators on the video said the residents weren't singing, they were shouting for help. So it's as dark as it could possibly be.
That's what I'm going to be saying next time. Yeah. Control your thoughts. They're fire! Thursday's Mail has news of what seems like a predictably cack-handed attempt to interest young people in life-saving vaccines.
Yes, you've summed that up very well. The gig that no one wanted, just 435 people had COVID vaccine at a cost of £535 each at East London Kebabs for Jabs Vaxfest.
We should emphasise that cost, as in that's...
As in, because they spent 237,000 Tower Hamlets Council on this. So, yes, it was essentially, as you imply, Simon, a patronising attempt to get the critical minds of Tower Hamlets to take the death jabs, I satirically referred to it. I mean, the wonderful life-saving vaccine, obviously. That was satire. So, I mean, an outdoor festival is the last place you're going to take a vaccine. I wouldn't even eat the burgers.
No, you're exactly right. That was the thing I thought when I saw it. I don't blame them, because they're desperate. They want to get young people on board and stuff. You know, what are young people like? They're like free festivals. But that is a terrible place to get an injection. Yes. I mean, they've spent 40 years convincing young people not to inject yourself at festivals.
Right. That's good. That's good. And the thing is, and also, don't get the council to organise anything. I mean, you know what I mean? To use the old phrase, they couldn't organise a Vax Fest in a pandemic. This is what. So yes, it didnn't work. This was, by the way, this was in July and August last year, and it didn't work. And yes, it's a total disaster.
Yeah, and this is a total example of how we pay far too much tax in this country. And maybe Rishi Sunak's wife is right to non-domicile, not pay any tax.
You've changed.
If Langdon Park, Tower Hamlets Council have got £237,000 to waste, and I'm pretty sure that's not the only money they wasted that year. If they've got that money to waste on, putting on some live event to get people to get vaccinated, like, come on, we're paying too much tax.
It brings out the full-on rattlesnake libertarian in us all, doesn't it?
The council should collect the bins and fix the roads and probably one other thing, and that's it. Not do any of this.
Is Tower Hamlets not the one that has the mayor who was like banned for the most corruption ever in a single individual about 5 years ago, and is now coming back and endorsed by Ken Livingstone?
Lufter?
Something like that. Yeah, it's a bad place. Final story for this segment. Microplastics have caught the eye of the Guardian. They are the new invisible enemy.
Oh, yeah, this is terrifying.
It is
They've
scary.
done a study on 11 out of 13 patients who are undergoing surgery to check in their lung tissue. They were undergoing, like, biopsies or whatever, and they found that in 11 of the 13 patients, they had particles of microplastic pollution. And this follows on from other studies that have shown that microplastic particles, these are tiny, really
like
tiny,
molecular
almost levels that have been found all around the world. They've been found at the North Pole, in the Antarctic, at top of Mount Everest. So they're everywhere. It's plastic that's been put into the environment and is broken down by the sun and by
they now circulate
energy.
like the rain. They're part of the vast global.
They're now in everything,
system.
and there are worries that they've caused cancer in cells. They're worried. There's not much known about what the negative impact of these microplastics is, but they're being found in the placentas of pregnant women, in the hearts, the brains, and other organs, and obviously in lungs. That's where they can.
I suppose the only thing to say is, there've always been pollutants knocking about, and we'll have to wait and see whether these are particularly bad ones. But it is too late. Every time I have been, I lost so much sleep about CJD. In about 2000.
Not falling for that again.
I'm like, I'm done now. My dad, who lives up in Norfolk, was showing me the sand that had collected in the lids of his various refuse bins outside that's come from the Sudan.
Oh yeah, it's in London.
Is lifted up and it's like, so this stuff, it just goes around. I'm not saying microplastics and sand are the same. I'm just saying once it's out there, it's out there. You can't contain
the particles
these
of sand don't do.
Oh no, I'm not saying we should not regard them as more dangerous. I'm just saying you have to accept that once it's out there. There's nothing you can do, so we've just got to wait and see now. But I don't know.
Much like the asteroid, we just have to wait, don't we?
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was going to be microplastics. With pandemics, asteroids, wars, nuclear wars, it turns out it's plastics in our blood that could kill us.
It could be. But when you read, there's a wonderful book by Bill Bryson called At Home, a sort of history of the sort of less glamorous sciences and how they've improved our standard of living since he bought a house that was built around the time of the Great Exhibition in 1850, and he wrote a book about how things have changed since then. it's absolutely extraordinary that people don't understand the different ways in which life has become safer and more pleasant, you know. We are now, of course, worried about these microplastics, and so we should be, and I'm sure agencies will investigate them. People used to live in living rooms that were so densely infested with smoke from their own fires, they couldn't see whether there was anyone else in the room with them. You would have to go, "Mother, are you there?"
Thank God somebody invented the chimney in 1820.
Well, they sort of had a sort of chimney, but it didn't have the suction. They didn't understand the dynamics of smoke extraction sufficiently well, and they didn't get the fires hot enough, I think. Often they were just smouldering heaps of dung, you know.
So life is better now, even though we're all...
All I'm saying is it's a continually evolving balance, but, you know, on the whole, everything's not terribly bad. Coming up, our final selection, we'll tell you why Ed Sheeran, Elon Musk and talking mushrooms are making the headlines. Stick around, we'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'm joined by Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. The Telegraph reports on Joe Biden being upstaged by Barack Obama. Nick, and I saw this clip earlier on Twitter. I have to say it was kind of excruciating. I don't know if we have it.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't know if we're showing it, but yeah, Joe Biden is snubbed as fans flock to Barack Obama during his White House return. So it's basically a very embarrassing video that we may or may not be showing in which Biden's sort of hanging around, trying to get attention, but everyone is just mobbing Obama, because Obama's still the man. No one takes Biden seriously. Here we go. And he does this bit, which I think, to be fair, he was gesturing to a woman.
I think that was also slightly... I think there's a certain degree of humility in him himself.
Yes, I see what you mean. I mean, some people have said there's a longer version.
Here we go. This is the one where
it's just as bad.
Yeah.
This one's terrible. This
he actually tries to attract.
He tries to tap his shoulder,
doesn't he?
In this one, he looks like an autograph hunter trying to get the attention of Obama. It's very, very painful.
And there is also a sense that Obama and Harris have a kind of rapport that Biden isn't quite.
Oh, of course.
Do you want to mean?
There's a full version where Obama actually slaps him, but we don't have that one. I mean, you can't imagine Trump doing it, can you? Trump would be in there pulling everyone's hand. He does that handshake where he pulls them up. He'd be centre stage. You can't really imagine anyone else. It's Biden's image. Tucker Carlson pointed out it's the Democrats are basically casting aside Biden now. They're sort of done with him. He hasn't worked out. He's served his purpose. And
I don't know if he hasn't worked out or if he has. I think to an extent he's done exactly what they expected him to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But it's funny, isn't it? Every president has a sort of weakness or caricature. Bill Clinton, it was philandering, which is fairly accurate, and W. Bush, it was sort of he's dumb, which is less accurate. And then Trump, he's sort of a crazy idiot, is the accusation. And Biden, he's sort of a confused old man. But Biden seems to be the worst of all. I mean, he seems to me to have, as a president, basically no redeeming features, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the only ones are, I suppose that you could say, if I was like going in to bat for him, I would say that he does not unnecessarily antagonise situations to the extent that Trump did, arguably.
Yeah, I think he handled the Ukraine crisis very well, and that's the situation that Donald Trump could have had us all.
You know what I'm going to say?
Basements.
It wouldn't have happened.
Would it have happened? I'm going to say,
Yeah.
would it have happened? I
Would it
humbly
happen?
asked the question, would it have happened?
No, there
because
is that
Putin
question.
was terrified that Trump would just bomb him.
Yeah.
And I've said to you before, I think that the Russians can't plan for Trump because he's unpredictable.
Trump was an apologist for Putin.
No, on the surface, he said things to flat out Putin's ego. Behind the scenes, he was very tough. He said, I will bomb Moscow if you do anything. And
It
Russian
was noticeable that nobody did anything. Nobody actually did anything.
Strategic planners was terrified of him. And ISIS, he showed the guy where the guy's house was. Yeah. Here's your housemate. And he's like, why are you showing me this?
It was extraordinary how, when he was voted in, when the election, like within 48 hours, my social media or my WhatsApp, my emails, full of people going, oh my God, I can't believe they've given a madman the nuclear codes. The next 4 years were probably the most devoid of international
getting on with
conflict.
North Korea, getting on with Russia.
When it was an eerie calm.
ISIS knocked out.
North Korea.
So we need to find the most belligerent person and make them the.
There is some argument for that. But going back to Biden's thing, I think just because this is the story. These are an individual clip. It's anecdotal, and we all understand how the media and the different angles can play these things. But they do seem to be mounting up, don't they? There's kind of almost like a daily feed of Biden either forgetting his lines, going off script in front of a teleprompter, telling some weird story about how he used to drive a truck and he didn't used to drive a truck.
Yeah, he's nearly 80. He's nearly 80. He wasn't the most coherent anyway.
Is he going to even make it to the full term? That's the question, I think.
Yeah, and what's going to happen with the next term? Who's going to
replace him? Yeah.
If he decides to stand, then the I don't know if it's law, but it's certainly all the precedents suggest that he cannot be challenged, right?
Yeah.
And Harris would be a disaster, right?
Who do
we
they
have to agree with that.
Who do they have? Trump. It's going to be Trump 24, let's face it. And who's going to go up against it? It's fascinating. I heard some people say Hillary could come back. Who do they have who could beat Trump?
It's like the end of a worldwide was it WWF or something? It's like one of those kind of narratives that's got out of control and they don't know how to end it. Or like Avengers Endgame, with the destruction of half the universe. There's nowhere to go from here. You can't. It's
I thought Tulsi Gabbard could be a prospect, but she's really leaned into the sort of Putin appeasement.
But the Democrats wouldn't touch her now. She's too offensive.
She's more in the kind of Ron Paul territory.
But nobody,
I think,
somewhat. She's ex-military.
I mean, she is, and she was Democrat, I think, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's Democrat, but she's not very on message with the Democrats.
She doesn't feel like she's really part of their system.
No.
Yeah. But nobody's ever got elected when they've bestowed so much economic pain on the country as Joe Biden. So, cancelling the Keystone Pipeline, that has really come home to roost.
That's absolutely.
And his approval rating is disastrous.
I got halfway through this next Times headline and I thought it was about one of those games where you strike a pose to get through a hole in the wall. But no, this is not so. Have you understood what I'm talking about here, Nick? This is the Ed Sheeran Shape of You.
Oh, I get it now that you've explained it. Yes, so
Ed Sheeran wins Shape of You. I think going to...
Well, this is an interesting one to me. If you're a music fan, Ed Sheeran has won a case about the song Shape of You against a grime artist, Sammy Switch, who claimed that he'd copied his song Oh Why. I've listened to them both. It is quite similar. And interestingly, that same song openly credits No Scrubs by TLC because he did nick that, but he's not nicked it because he's admitted it.
Yeah.
He's got a bit of history doing these things, of taking songs, or acknowledging he's using them. This is an interesting issue because can you really... Tom Petty, who I love recently, he won that, not that recently because he's dead now, but he won that case for Won't Back Down against Sam Smith's Stay With Me. And it's like, can you really own that melody?
I didn't know that had been the case, but he's right.
It's really just... It's really just a few notes of the major scale, but then he had the next sequence of notes the same as well. And it's like, how large a sequence of notes there have to be be before he can say, I own that?
His name is Tom Petty, to be fair.
Well, he was quite cool about it. He said, it happens, but he still took the money. But unless they invent a B sharp, we're going to have a lot of these same problems. There's not that many notes.
Ed Sheeran himself has come out quite strongly, not just like, I've won the case, but can we please stop this kind of endless, vexatious court cases because it's damaging, it limits creativity. I have some sympathy with that, but equally, you have to say, you look at the nature of songwriting nowadays, there's like, so many people writing songs, the melody, I don't know, is it am I just getting old? I don't hear much kind of melodic invention anymore, really.
It's almost impossible not to be melody.
But you can't hear the words.
Can I say...
I think they emphasise other aspects of the music.
Can I counter that, Simon?
They're not quite the melody. Do you know what I mean? They seem to be much more to do with the rhythm or the
of course.
Tonal...
You're listening to auto-tune. You're listening to mumblecore. You're talking about mumblecore. Mumblecore is like the worst possible music you can make. But can I... Go on.
Well, what's interesting is sometimes this goes on and on. So Radiohead, their song Creep, they were sued by the Hollies, who said that, successfully sued by the Hollies, who said that they ripped off a song by the Hollies.
What was the song?
I can't remember. I was just trying to find it on the internet. I couldn't find it. But then Lana Del Rey wrote a song called Get Free, and Radiohead sued her.
Right.
For ripping off Creep.
Wow.
So the same, I think we're going to see this every generation.
It feels moribund, doesn't it? I remember when Stairway to Heaven, which famously had an opening, there was a guy called Randy California, who'd been a guitarist in San Francisco in the 60s, who said, they nicked my opening. And it was like, it was finally settled in court in 2010, like 40 years after. You just go, this is the point at which the lawyers arrive to pick over the corpses. You know, it's over really at this point.
There's a brilliant one by Dexys Midnight Runners where they just stole the riff from Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London. But then the song they did, it was a song about how all songs sound the same on the radio. There was a certain irony which made it almost worthwhile. But my counter to your earlier point is that Bob Dylan, you're saying nowadays, blah, blah, blah. But Bob Dylan, even back in the day, where he would take songs that were in public domain, simply change the words. So Penny's Farm became Hard Times in New York.
A little twist and a little inversion. Oh, I mean, but I mean, even sometimes the lyrical content and everything, he would just add the tiniest. And Zeppelin, again, funnily enough, of course, sued by a white guitarist, never adequately sued by Willie Dixon and all the rest of all these old blues guys. They just, reworked old songs. It is an endless, ongoing, oceanic churn, isn't it? Music
and happens in comedy as well. Like comedians occasionally get sued for ripping off other comedians.
The famous one, Harry Hill. I love this story because both people come out of it well. Harry Hill watched Bob Monkhouse on stage at Royal Variety performance, I think, and he did a joke about, "I've got a step ladder. It's not my real ladder." And Harry said, "I know this is embarrassing, Bob, but I wrote that joke, and that is. I know how it works on your circuit is different. You don't have the same kind of respect for copyright things in general, but that is my joke, and I'd really appreciate it if you didn't do that again." And Bob Monkhouse was utterly charming and said, "I'm so sorry, Harry, it won't happen again, I apologise." About 2 weeks later, Harry Hill got a package in the post, a VHS tape from Bob Monkhouse of him telling that joke in about 1964.
With a one-liner, something like that.
Owned him.
Bound to happen. Absolute gentleman about it. To Thursday's Times, Leo, and everyone's footloose cannon and cosmonaut has plans to shake up Twitter. I'm quite excited about this.
Oh, yes. So Elon Musk has taken a 9.2% stake in Twitter. He's been buying shares over the last few weeks, just quietly buying them, and has acquired, I think that makes him the largest shareholder.
He owns not that quietly. He's put polls all over Twitter, but carry on.
He only released the purchase of the shares, though.
Once he bought them, he released that. So he wants some changes to Twitter, which has notoriously been censoring people. It censored Trump. Obviously took Trump off Twitter while leaving terrible ayatollahs and Al Qaeda, wishing
Taliban,
death. And even now, somebody can openly call for J.K. Rowling to be murdered, and that's left up because that's got the right politics behind it for Twitter, and whatever green-haired septum.
So Musk has only got 10% share. He can't change their policy overnight, like with that degree of.
Well, I think with 9.2% of the stock, you get a seat on the board, and you can you can make some changes. And recently Twitter have censored the Babylon Bee. They took the Babylon Bee.
Yeah, that was terrible.
They did it. Which they're comedians. They're satirists.
And it was a good joke as well. It wasn't even. It wasn't. They're not all solid gold, but it wasn't like a particularly mean, nasty joke. It wasn't as bad as a Chris Rock joke. It
was Rachel Levine is our Man of the Year, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think she literally had been in Time magazine or something. What I find interesting is that Jack, who is the
Jack
Dorsey, who is the founder of Twitter and goes by @Jack on Twitter and comes and goes
something
a little
like 2.25%.
He's also expressed a degree of sadness and regret about what he has allowed Twitter to become and what we have all allowed the internet to become from its early days of being the Wild West, how it is being now So that feels like that might even be opening up an opportunity for a partnership there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this draws more attention to the fact that the rules that govern big tech are completely, they're oligarchs, they're billionaires, they control everything. There's no transparency around the rules, and they're applied capriciously and with no clarity.
Why don't they just adhere to the First Amendment, especially in America? They've got the First Amendment. Those people who are smarter than you go from the Constitution.
Because they wriggle out of the idea that it's the town square because it's a private corporation. But I think that is wearing thin. Let's take a look at a story from Thursday's Guardian now. Nick, the jokes are pretty obvious with this one. Mushrooms are talking to one another. Certain kinds of mushrooms are. We've dumped a couple ahead, sorry.
I totally...
a couple of boring stories.
I definitely have it in here.
There are apparently 50 words of language, if I remember this correctly, that mushrooms are able to use.
Yeah, and it sounds like the kind of story
they
that
don't write their own press releases, though, unfortunately.
It sounds like a story that someone came up with on mushrooms.
Yeah, well, that was my immediate thought. But
yes, mushrooms communicate with each other using up to 50 words. And and the Guardian had a great pun here. It suggests they may be champignon communicators. I thought it was just a classic
breakfast
typo.
Of champignon.
But it's a pun.
The Guardian, that's just a typo.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. So it seems so mathematical analysis of the electrical signals fungi seemingly send to one another has identified patterns that bear a striking structural similarity to human speech. And I already didn't feel comfortable eating mushrooms because of their weird texture, but now I know that they can speak to each other.
My kids don't trust them at all. I love mushrooms. I love mushrooms, and I mean that in both senses. But I really do love mushrooms.
What are the two senses?
Yeah, well, I love mushrooms, and I love doing mushrooms.
Oh, I got it.
But they are fantastic. They are fantastic. There's something fascinating. They're quite meaty. They do suggest somehow that they're not a vegetable. I mean, I don't know. They're like another category of stuff. We don't quite know what to make of them.
And we owe all life on Earth to mushrooms. Because in the Carboniferous period, which is a type of pasta, in the Carboniferous period, that's 300 million years ago, plant life was so abundant. All these ferns and all these trees were sucking so much CO2 out of the atmosphere and sequestering it as coal. That's turned into lignite. Mushrooms came along when CO2 in the atmosphere. Now we're worried about too much. Back then it was so low, all life on Earth was about to die out. Mushrooms came along and started processing the lignin with white rot and released CO2 back into the atmosphere.
There's a very successful book a couple of years ago, which I have on my shelf still. I think it's called something Life, Entangled Life. Have you seen this? Written by Merlin Sheldrake. And it's all about the extraordinary history. I know. He's the son of Rupert Sheldrake, who is one of the sort of leading kind of,
he's the better known
Fortean Times kind of guy. He believes that dogs have telepathic communication between one another and all that.
That's just true.
It really is of an extraordinary area of worth investigating. This next story and our final one for the evening is about the history of communication generally, and this is about dogs faking interest in our
interestingly, after you mention dogs communicating with us telepathically, dogs have apparently mastered facial expressions to manipulate us emotionally.
Yeah.
So dogs, our relationship with dogs, goes back thousands of years to Paleolithic times.
Yeah.
And now dogs can make themselves look really appealing and puppy doggish.
You know what this reminded me of? Pixar cartoons and the other one, DreamWorks. Is it? All their characters have that eyebrow, and it's all based on what dogs do in order to get biscuits, isn't it? That kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look needy.
All communication is rooted in whoring.
Instead.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do us for tonight. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Leo. Tomorrow evening, I believe we have Stephen N. Allen in the host seat, which is an unusual aberration for this channel, but I'm unable to be here. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you again very soon. This has been Headliners. Good night.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. For The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Despite all the moral outrage, the European Union has paid vast amounts to Russia since the invasion of Ukraine for its oil, its gas, its coal, and yet given a very small amount of money to Ukraine. Russia winning the economic war. Just how hypocritical are the European Union?